We're in the midst of two interrelated pandemics that are creating death and devastation across the United States. The COVID-19 virus has generated a worldwide pandemic, causing more than 422,000 deaths worldwide and 118,000 in the US. The handling of this public health crisis in the US has been guided by the dictates of the capitalists, the 1%, and their administrators in government in Washington and in the states. The pandemic has pulled back the covers on capitalism and racism. What many of us know from our lived experiences is being viewed by the world and reinforcing the need for system change. Inequality, poverty, unstable employment, low wages, and lack of health care are in the spotlight as Black and brown people experience the disproportionate impact of the disease, the layoffs, and being forced to work in dangerous situations to protect the profits of the corporations. They still refuse to be transparent with data about the impact on Black and brown communities, driving communities to struggle against them for this information. Forced to provide funds for economic support, Congress and the administration have made sure the corporations have received the majority of support that ends up going to shareholders and not the workers. The stimulus packages have not provided sufficient funds for workers to meet their needs during this crisis, which is nowhere near the end. Millions without income for food and rent is a powder keg, and yet another signal for system change. The conversation around essential workers has highlighted the fact that all workers are essential to capitalism, not just during a crisis, but every day. People are better understanding their role versus that of the bosses and owners, and what happens when they are not working. Critical lessons are being learned about the willingness of capitalism to sacrifice workers, but also the potential power we have when we decide to refuse to work and lay down our tools, so to speak. The government's response has been criminal. With knowledge about the potential virus in early January, it wasn't until March that 45 started to implement any of the critical measures to address the developing crisis. On February 28th, he even said, quote, "It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle, it will disappear," end quote. He must be held accountable for the deaths of thousands. One of the most prominent lessons for us during this crisis is that Medicare for all is mandatory and must be on the top of our agenda as we fight against the bosses and their pawns in government. At the top of the agenda, Medicare for all. Communities resist on two levels. We fight to protect so-called essential workers on the job. We protect their personal equipment, safety measures, and hazard pay.
Jamu, go a little slower.
But we also fight for others to stay home due to our health vulnerabilities and resist the premature openings that have shown to be a mistake with escalating cases, especially in the South. This is a key front in the war against Black America. The other pandemic is the increasing rise of police murders of Black men and women across the country with impunity. That is to say, in spite of body cameras and the cameras of bystanders, they kill Black people with bullets, choke holes, and in the case of George Floyd, a knee and the full body weight of a Minneapolis cop on his neck. As we meet, yet another murder has taken place in Atlanta. Friday night, Rashad Brooks was shot in the back by a police officer after being tested for DUI at a Wendy's drive-in line. Black communities have been in the streets in a rebellion since the murder of George Floyd. Cities large and small have seen protests in support of the demand that Black lives should matter. The police have responded with violence, and the National Guard has been deployed with 45 threatening to mobilize the federal troops. Symbols of white supremacy are being taken down by the people or local governments fearing the masses will do it. Solidarity and rebellion has been seen internationally, from Africa to Europe to the Africans on the continent and African descendants in Europe are tearing down symbols of colonialism and the slave trade. The widespread engagement of white youth is a new phenomenon, not seen in response to Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland, and others. This level of response from white people has not been seen since the anti-war movement in the 60s and 70s. This is a good thing. Nonetheless, we remain alert to the threat of armed white supremacists. Young people are not willing to accept the old reform demands of better training. They want a total restructuring of policing. Beyond community oversight with subpoena power, they are demanding demilitarizing the police, defunding the police under a decentralized system. The response to the racist violence by police on the part of labor has been encouraging. Many international and local unions have issued statements. The video by the Texas Gulf labor movement is a good example. Even more encouraging is the act of transit workers in Minneapolis and New York, refusing to drive buses filled with protesters that have been arrested. Longshore workers on both coasts, including our brothers and sisters at ILA 1422 in Charleston and ILWU Local 10 in San Francisco, held actions on the docks last week, refusing to work for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Start work again on Juneteenth in honor of George Floyd and all the other victims of police murders. And finally, there are campaigns by locals, central labor councils, and individual union members to expel the police unions, the chief defenders of killer cops, from the AFL-CIO and other unions that represent police officers. From the chaos and struggle of these pandemics, the people will come to a better understanding of the system and become permanent fighters for a society free of capitalist exploitation and racism. Let's all contribute to making this happen.
Thank you, Ajamo. Good evening, my siblings in the struggle. My name is Libby Devlin. I'm the National Bargaining Director for National Nurses United. So I'm going to be facilitating the panel for this evening. But I first wanted to, fill people in case there was some information that you would want to have about the Southern Workers Assembly, which is the group that's sponsoring this webinar. We're an assembly of workers and unions throughout the South. This is the second webinar in a series that we're going to be doing over the summer. The first one was a general overview, included people from a lot of different industries. I had about 200 people participate and a couple thousand more who watched online.
Maybe slow down a little for the translation.
Sorry, I have a very bad habit of speaking fast. I'll work on that. This webinar is going to be focused on the meatpacking industry. The ones coming up in the summer that we've already got planned out one will be about the transportation industry, one will be about the healthcare industry. And these webinars are part of our Safe Jobs, Save Lives campaign, which was started in April in response to the COVID pandemic. And the campaign's purpose is to organize workers to fight for health and safety in the workplace and to build organization in their workplace. So these workplace organizations that are organizing, they group up in local assemblies. And these local assemblies support each other in their struggles, and they also build power locally. And we think that this is a sort of foundational form of organizing that we really want to encourage people to be part of. So we have a wonderful panel tonight. I'm going to introduce them in just a minute. I want to first point out at the bottom of your screen, there are two buttons that you can look at. One is Q&A. And if you have questions, you can enter those questions in that section. And those we have time set aside at the end of this webinar to discuss the questions and answers, and some of them might get answered directly into the Q&A function. The other is the chat function, which is right next to Q&A. If you have not yet introduced yourself, go ahead and feel free to say whatever you want in that chat. It's it's an open forum and people are free to converse on there. So now I'm going to introduce the panel. Our first speaker is Evelyn. Evelyn works at Hayes Farms in Morganton, North Carolina. She's an active member of the Western North Carolina Worker Center, which is an organization that was set up to build power among workers, particularly workers of color, through organizing, education, and direct action. And so I was gonna ask Evelyn to answer this question for you all. I know, Evelyn, you've been doing trainings on your rights in your workplace. You've also been organizing actions among your coworkers, and you don't even have a union. So it's very impressive, this work that you've been doing to create a safe workplace. And so I was hoping you could tell us all about that. Evelyn, are you here? Okay, I know that she was having some technical difficulty earlier, so we'll see if we can work that out and come back to her. So next, I'll introduce Freddy Ash. Freddy Ash is a steward with UFCW Local 1529, which is a very large local in Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Kentucky. Freddy works at Pico Foods in Brooksville, Mississippi. And Freddy, what I wanted to ask you about is that we've heard at your plant, the Pico plant in Brooksville, Mississippi, which is union, that you were able to win a $3 an hour hazard pay premium, and you have not had any COVID cases at your plant. But down the street at the Pico plant in Canton, Mississippi, they did have some COVID-19 cases, and the workers there took action to ensure their safety. So can you talk to us about that? And Ms. Julia, we'll come back to you after Freddie, okay?
Sure. Thank you guys for having me. Yeah, I work at the Pico Foods in Brookfield, and first I would like to say they have done an outstanding job with our work and our safety. They've gone far and beyond to make sure that the workers are being safe. So we can give heads off to the Pico Foods in Brooksville. But in our facility that's in Kansas City, they had some COVID cases, and they said it happened a couple of weeks ago. They wanted some of the workers to go to this department where some employees were working in the department and they had been tested positive. So the workers had heard about it, the company knew about it, and they wanted the workers to go from their department to work in this department where the workers had been tested positive. So the employees refused to go, and unions ended up getting involved in it. So ultimately, the employees was on the company to do was to give them answers, was it safe or was it unsafe? So the union intervened, and some of the employees said that some of the employees, they left. So I could never figure out why, if you're working as much as we work in these plants, because everybody is less than 6 feet apart. And all the employees was wanting to know, was it safe? But the employee refused to give them answers, so they took upon themselves. Well, if you guys are not going to tell us or give us the answers, but we'll take matters in our hands. But then the union had to come in, and some of them listened and some of them they didn't, but they didn't have to add Pico Foods in Kansas City.
Thank you, Freddie. Okay, we're gonna go back to Evelyn. We're gonna go back to Evelyn, who's on the line, who's on the phone line. Evelyn from Case Farms and the Western North Carolina Workers Center.
Basilio, you might have to unmute. Basilio.
Okay. Okay, we're going to come back. We're going to come back to Evelyn. We're going to go over to Magali Licoli. She's the director of Venceremos, which is they're an organization that's been organizing poultry workers in Northwest Arkansas. They've been organizing Latinx poultry workers in 5 different plants across Arkansas. And so I was going to ask this question, Magali, you've created a new organization, which is very impressive, Venceremos, to help the largely Latinx poultry workers in 5 different plants across Arkansas to organize for safety. And you've tried to organize for strikes. You've tried to organize very effective collective actions and rallies outside the plant. And I was hoping you could talk to us about how you've done that and what your successes have been.
Yes, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today to share a little bit of our work. So I've been organizing workers since 2014, but really the conditions of poultry workers have been always terrifying. But right now with this pandemic, the situation and the lack of protection of these workers have been horrible for many of these workers. So we began organizing workers. I began organizing workers around the pandemic in early March, because in early March, workers were not provided PPE. They were not providing any social distancing measures. Poultry workers are used to go to work while sick because they don't have paid sick leave. So all of these demands, we began doing our online campaign addressing all of these issues and demands to poultry companies. However, because of the pressure that we began doing that, companies began answering to those responses, but that was not really what was happening with workers. So what I did and what we began was really organize workers in these different plants. We are based in Springdale, Arkansas, headquarters of Tyson Foods. So in Springdale, Arkansas, there are several companies, growing companies like George's, Cargill, and Tyson Foods. So I began organizing workers. Venceremos is a worker-led organization, and I co-founded this organization with a group of Latinx women, poultry women. So with them, we began addressing how are we gonna tackle these demands, tackle these issues. And so we began organizing workers inside the plants by gathering signatures and creating a petitions to Tyson Foods and George's. So in one of the Tyson plants, we gather close to 200 signatures. And in the George's plant, it was around 100. So we did actions outside the plant, and the companies began feeling the pressure. So, but it was until late April that companies such as Tyson began providing PPE to workers and creating some more social distancing. It is really hard in this industry to really practice social distancing. So what Tyson began providing was to place plexiglasses, but workers work shoulder to shoulder in many of the areas in the processing plants, and it's the plexiglasses don't even prove that it's a way to prevent the spread of the virus. So still workers were really concerned. The companies were checking the temperature of workers, but that was not enough because many workers are asymptomatic. Many workers could have 14 days before they show symptoms, and in those 14 days they could have spread the virus. So what we saw is that these companies acted too late in preventing the spread of the virus. Workers were yelling for protections in early March, and it was until late April that Tyson began doing these changes whenever they already had positive cases of COVID-19. So they didn't provide paid quarantine for workers. The only thing that they did to trace workers was to inform them that they were at risk of being in contact with someone who tested positive. But what the company did was only to check the temperature of these workers. And so they really allowed workers to get sick. And so right now, the situation is that we have outbreaks in all Arkansas. More than 1,000 workers have tested positive of COVID-19. And so right now, the workers, I know that our communities are always terrified of organizing, but what I saw really, it was the urgency to organize, to mobilize. So what I was doing, because we cannot meet in person or have our meetings all together, so I began organizing workers by phone, by text. And so workers really felt like they needed to speak up. And so right now, with all the outbreaks that could have been prevented if the companies could have listened to the demands of the workers in early March. So right now, the workers have also been doing strikes inside the plants, like organic strikes. And we are trying to do really a huge strike because it's unbelievable the way that these companies are dehumanizing more of these workers. These plants are composed by Marshallese, Latinx communities, Black folks, and what the government really and the companies are doing is just attacking them and the ways that they are dehumanizing them completely. And so the workers need to stand up. They need to continue organize to do actions. And so we've been doing car caravans, calling on the governor, calling on the companies to shut down the facilities that have already outbreaks. Tyson right now released its report last week, and there is over 200 workers in this facility in Springdale that had tested positive of COVID-19. And this is not just, this is the starting point, because the company is now forcing workers to come back to work the next week of testing positive of COVID-19, because these workers are, most of the workers are asymptomatic, and they are forcing them to come back to work within a week and exposing more workers to get sick. Right now, the companies are trying to blame the workers by saying that the workers got sick at the stores, at parties or social gatherings, which is not really the truth. The company has allowed these workers to get sick and continue allowing the workers to get sick. So right now we are going to organize a march coming next Saturday on calling the governor, on calling the companies that they need to shut down. Workers want these facilities to be shut down for deep cleaning and put all the workers who are at risk in paid quarantine. And so this is what we are going to assure that we are going to contain the virus. Right now, Arkansas is a hotspot of COVID-19. We have over 12,000 people in Arkansas already tested positive of COVID-19. So we need to act immediately so that these companies act accordingly to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Thank you, Magali. That was a very helpful and informative presentation. Thank you. So now we have our commercial break. So the Southern Workers Assembly is, as I told you, a group of organizations and workers who we sort of work together to try to figure out ways to build a more powerful worker organization across the South. It is an all-volunteer organization, and what we do a Southern Workers School, which we've been doing for a few years, and a lot of people have gone through the school, and it's been really, I think, a pretty good program that we've run. We do these webinars. We've been working with the different local unions around the area and running the campaigns, in particular right now, the Save Jobs, Save Lives campaign. And we need to have some support if people can do that. So Ben, I was wondering if you could put the link to the, a picture of the link so that people can see the link to make a donation if people are interested in doing that. Here we go. It's a GoFundMe page. If you may not be able to see it if you have. Okay, it's www.gofundme.com, a bunch of backslashes, Save Jobs, Save Lives campaign. So if people can look at that and see that and make a donation, we'd really appreciate it. The other part of our commercial break here is that we're going to be doing a survey question. And the question is, similarly to how we have pulled together this webinar from meatpacking workers, the Southern Workers Assembly is working to build worker unity councils across different industries in the South. Would you be interested in helping to set up small discussions with other workers in your industry? And so we want everybody to mark, we have about 140 people, 141 people participating right now. If everybody could just mark your survey, we'll announce the results on our next commercial break in a little bit after we have some more panelists. So everybody mark this. Give you guys a second to do this. Okay, we're gonna try to go back again to Evelyn from Case Farms in Morganton, North Carolina, and a member of the Western North Carolina Workers Center. And I think we figured out the technical problem. We're gonna link her up with her phone. Has that been worked out?
Bueno, hello,
Okay,
hello,
Hi.
you're here, wonderful.
hello. Bueno, bueno,
Bueno,
bueno, soy Evelyn.
Hello, I'm Evelyn.
Bueno,
Hello.
okay, go ahead.
Sí, soy.
Go ahead and talk. Do you hear me?
Bueno,
Yes, we hear you. Go ahead and start.
solo quiero
I just want
hablarle un
to
poco lo que está
talk a
pasando
little
en
bit
la
about
compañía
what's
de
happening
Farm.
in the Case Farms company.
Corriendo riesgo
We are in a lot of risk
COVID-19.
in terms of COVID-19.
Apenas antier el viernes lo enteraron un
Just
señor que salió
Friday
en la
that we
pollera.
found out that one man was affected in the poultry farms and Case Farms. He died.
Otro señor que
He was
trabaja
just
de
buried.
noche es un
Another
no
worker,
sé cómo se llama.
another black worker, I don't know his name.
Trabaja de día.
Another person who works at night, another person works in the day. So we are really worried. We're really scared with COVID-19.
Hay muchas personas hace
There's a lot of
15
people. 15 days ago, 2 weeks ago,
o sea, salieron como 150 positivos en la pollera.
150 positive cases came out at the poultry farm because there was a checkup, like a screening.
Bueno,
Sigue hablando, sigue hablando.
okay, entonces
Just keep talking. Okay. So what happened? 150 people came out with positive tests 2 weeks ago. That was a screening. We're really scared. Also, someone in my own house turned out positive. So we're really at risk with this illness. We don't have a lot of space at work. We're shoulder to shoulder, standing side by side. So we're really scared. We're really, really scared with this virus. That's what's happening in the factory. There's 3 people working at Case Farms who've died. One Latinx person, 1 Black person, and 1 white person. That's what's happening, all of this. So we're really frightened. I haven't been affected personally, but this I'm really, really scared that I get infected as well. I'm scared because I have diabetes, and I'm really scared. I'm also scared to go to work. I'm super scared to go to work because of the needs that I have. I have to go. I have to go and risk my life in that company. I don't think this is just in my company that it's happening, and it's everywhere, and the risk is even just going into, shops or wherever. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn, for that very moving presentation. It makes me very even happier to know that you are working with the Worker Center to organize workers and understand your rights on the job so that you can, be part of the fight back that other people are also working with you on. So thank you for joining us tonight. Our next panelist is Andre Barnett. He's the Secretary Treasurer of UFCW Local 1208 at Smithfield Foods in Tar Heel, North Carolina. This UFCW local has got meat packers, food processors. They're all around North Carolina. So, Andre, here's your question. You work at the largest hog slaughtering factory in the world, where you process 36,000 hogs a day. So that's a gigantic workforce, and it must be really difficult to be socially distant in the workplace. And so we've seen some pictures of some of your members that were shared with social media about the crowded break room and that there was a COVID outbreak. And so what actions have you been taking, and what successes have you had in helping to keep your members safe?
Okay, first one, I want to make sure everyone can hear me. And also I want to thank you all for inviting me and allowing me to participate on this panel and in this presentation. So I don't know where to begin, Libby. I'm gonna start off with safety. We, the union, along with Smithfield management, sat down and thought about everything that we could do to try to make it possible for the workers to stay safe. But in a processing plant as large as Smithfield Tar Heel, where you got over 4,000 workers in that plant, between 2 shifts, is almost impossible to do it the way we think it ought to be done. But I'm just going to read off just some of the things that we have done to implement and enhance the safety and for the help of the workers. Up under the safety, we do a thermal imaging to detect fever. Everybody that comes through the doors of that plant has to be checked for their temperatures. We also invited the CDC in from Atlanta. They sent a panel of about 7 members, and they walked the plant from where the hogs are unloaded off trailers to where the product is being shipped out. The CDC spent about 3 days in the plant going over everything, making sure that Smithfield was following every protocol of the CDC that Smithfield was trying to and have made sure that Smithfield had implemented every safety precaution that they could have done. The CDC was pleased with that. Smithfield did a mandatory 14-day quarantine with pay anybody that was diagnosed with COVID-19 or anyone that said that they were exposed to COVID-19. All high-risk employees are encouraged to stay home. And let me tell you what that means. We have employees, hundreds, that's over 60 years old or that have underlying conditions. All those employees no longer work. They are off at home with pay, not missing one penny, one nickel, one dime. It is mandatory that they wear masks, face shields, and proper PPE. Smithfield has implemented 200 sanitizing stations, not 200, I'm sorry, 2,000 sanitizing stations throughout the plant. They have put walking signs in to encourage employees to stay 6 feet apart when they're not on the production line, meaning in the common areas such as the cafeteria, locker rooms, and the hallways. They have restricted all non-essential visitors coming to the plant. They mapped out all the break rooms and only send as many people by line as they can to space out in the cafeterias and break rooms. As you said, you've seen the videos throughout the media that work with the CNN, and Smithfield has done everything they possibly could to make sure those workers are separated or divided on the lines with plastic partitions, or divided one to a table in the cafeteria. You are allowed to eat one to a table while you're at that table. If you're not eating, that mask has to be on at all times. They increased the nursing staff 24/7 coverage, increased signage promoting hand washing and social distancing, restricted entry to 2 turnstiles in order to maintain social distance. That's 1 turnstile coming in, 1 turnstile going out. I'm going to go on down to cleaning. They intensified cleaning and sanitizing in the non-production areas, increased frequency of touch point sanitation to be done hourly, increased hand sanitation by all employees at a minimum of every 30 minutes, added buckets of sanitizing wipes to use throughout the plant to clean equipment. Every day, myself and the local union president, we sit down with management and we talk about anything that could have arisen or that we missed to bring attention to making sure that the workers are safe. Everyone that's not aware of the Defense Production Act, which President Trump invoked maybe about a month and a half ago, making mandatory for all processing plants to stay open. We are an essential business. We provide an essential service to all Americans throughout the United States. So unfortunately for us, we have to be on that front line every day, making sure that there's food available for all families. And we just ask that all workers throughout the United States that's not involved in processing, that's not in healthcare, that's not in these food stores, that you continue to just pray for us and pray for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. That was, it's great to hear when people have successes and are able to protect themselves and have safer jobs. So thank you. I do want to apologize for how fast I speak. I know it's been difficult for the interpreters to keep up, so I apologize for that. I did want to give people the results of the survey. We had 49 of the participants say that they wanted to set up local worker assemblies and be part of a discussion of having a worker unity council in their local area. And so I want to suggest that what you do, if you were one of the 49, is to send your name when your contact information as a reply to the email that was about this webinar. And then that way we'll be able to gather up the information and get back to you about setting up a local unity council in your area. So that's the end of the panel. I do want to remind people, if you have questions, that you should enter them into the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we're going to have time at the end to go back and answer all the questions people had. And then we also, people, if you have not had a chance to introduce yourself in the chat, please do that. We're going to have another speaker here. It's Abdul Halim Ott, and he is a professor of African American Studies at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And he's done a lot of, as part of a group with the Southern Workers Assembly, they did a lot of research about the meatpacking industry and the COVID-19 impact on that industry. And there's a pamphlet that they put together that he's going to review with us. There's been some incredible research about this. And so I'm going to turn it over to Abdul, who's going to go through the pamphlet and explain to us what it's all about. Abdul, you ready?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead. Let me turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for everyone being here, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm speaking on behalf of the SWA, the Southern Workers Assembly Communications Committee. We are a 3-in-1 combination committee: worker, student, and movement veteran. Those are the 3 elements that are in our committee. Our work was focused on all 16 Southern states, combining data. We used Excel spreadsheet, and each person took on data responsibilities. This was a democratic process of doing research. On each of the 16 Southern states, we included facts and fights. Facts and fights. That is, demographic statistics about the population, the workers, and the industry, along with examples of struggles that workers have waged in each of those states. Facts and fights. We also included 10 basic questions about the industry, the experience of workers, and their relationship to the community and the future. Let me give you an example. We ask a question: who owns meatpacking? We discovered that this was an example of monopoly capitalism. Not the competition we often hear about as the value of capitalism to create better prices and better quality. What we have in meatpacking is a few companies dominate, dictate prices, dictate quality, control the government. Let me give you examples. In general, the government reports statistics that there are 670 beef slaughtering processing facilities. 670 in beef, 611 in pork, and 252 in chicken. But research has demonstrated that only 50 plants control 98% of all slaughtering and processing of meat. It gets even worse than that. 4 plants control 85% of beef. 4 plants control 65% of pork. And 4 plants control 60% of chicken. In other words, a few capitalists control what people eat in this country. And of the top 8 companies, 3 of them are owned by other countries. 2 by Brazilian billionaires, and 1 by Chinese billionaires. We also ask another question. Can you make a living working in a meatpacking plant? Now, as it turns out, meatpacking used to be a well-paid part of the working class. Butchering was highly skilled. Take a carcass, and cut it down into usable parts. However, factory industrial meatpacking has completely reversed that. So now workers in meatpacking are paid less than the average workers in industrial production, because the skill level has been de-skilled to the level where workers are often sitting there for an entire shift with one arm or two arms, repeating the same repetitive tasks all day. So not only before this factory process was meatpacking one of the most dangerous jobs, today it is increasingly one of the most dangerous jobs. And this is, I'm not even talking about COVID and the virus. I'm just talking about what it means to work in meatpacking. But of course, when you look at can you make a living, the owners of meatpacking, the top people are making millions of dollars. The owner of Tyson, his annual income is over $10 million a year. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says that the average worker in meatpacking makes $29,000 a year. And of course, we know that meatpacking is tied to health conditions, not only health conditions in the plant. And here we're talking about meatpacking plants being hotspots of the virus infection. We know this, along with prisons and nursing homes for the elderly. But meatpacking is associated with environmental issues. Those hog farms in North Carolina with huge pools of waste from the pigs that are spoiling the water and the air. These companies dominate rural communities, destroy environments, destroy the family farm, recruit undocumented immigrant workers and threaten them with ICE, and pay millions to lobby all levels of government. Our research was based on government reports, media reports, and what little information we could get from the companies. This is a critical problem. The information we need is not available. We cannot count on them. Our focus has to be on workers themselves. We hope this pamphlet will be used to stimulate group discussion. Let me quote from the pamphlet, From Workers to Workers. We know work better than anyone else. We are the truth of what goes on in any industry. We think about it. We talk about it. A group read of this pamphlet will organize everyone's knowledge and improve everyone's public speaking. How else will our truths get into other people's heads, even the media? How else will things change? Schedule as many sessions as you like. Expect people to drop in and out of these discussions of the pamphlet. Just try to hear from everyone present, and forward motion is our goal. This pamphlet is for meatpacking workers and for all other workers as well. It's for everyone. Our pamphlet, like this webinar, is in English and Spanish. It's online, and it will be available in print. We know that workers are the most knowledgeable about what their own experience. And we look forward to a time when workers take ownership of knowledge about what work and the economy is all about. We need workers to be the truth tellers about what is going on. And of course, we know that the more workers become truth tellers, they become change makers, fighting against the exploitation and oppression in this despicable system of monopoly capitalism. We hope our pamphlet is a step in that direction. Go online and get it. Write to us and we'll send you a hard copy. Please join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abdul. You're always so clear in your explanations of things. I appreciate that. All right, so we have a second survey question of whether you'd be interested in receiving copies of this new pamphlet in the mail to circulate and start discussions with your coworkers. So if people could answer that yes or no. As a follow-up, if you were one of the 49 people that said you wanted to be part of building a local worker unity council or a local worker assembly, you can also send your name and your information to info@southernworker.org. If you go to info@southernworker.org and send in your name, you'll be able to receive some assistance from the Southern Workers Assembly. We'll work with you and help you set up that local worker unity council. Second follow-up, we've raised half of our fundraising goal from during this call with one extraordinarily large donation, which was anonymous. So whoever you are, thank you. It was an incredibly large donation. And so we are halfway to our fundraising goal. If you want to go to the GoFundMe page, it's in the chat. You can open it up in the chat and you can just open it up directly to the fundraising page, the GoFundMe page, and make a donation if you are interested in doing that. So again, we have the Q&A at the bottom if you want to write in questions. And we have the chat if you want to announce yourself or introduce yourself to the group. And we're going to spend the next 15 minutes answering the questions and answers. So Dante, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you go through and delegate the questions to whoever you think needs to answer them.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Libby. It's great to see all of you today. Yeah, so we had one question for Magali. The question was, what might the rest of us do to help support the Arkansas packing house workers, the struggle you're leading there in Arkansas? What can we do to help you?
Yeah, thank you. One thing that the people can do is to visit our Facebook page. We often do our call to actions or to sign up our petitions. We have 2 petitions with change.org and Move On. And so we often do updates in that petition so people can do either emails, Twitters, hashtags, or comments to like Tyson page or things like that. One of the other way is if they are local, to engage in volunteering and participate in our actions like a protest or caravans and things like that. Another way is to support us with donations. We are a grassroots organization and we do all of this work voluntarily. So we are working on building our budget to hire staff to do this more efficiently. So those are the ways that people can help because we are currently calling on people to call the governor to order the shutdown of processing plants with outbreaks, and also sending emails to different companies here locally. And so, yeah, that's some of the ways that they can engage into our work.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Really inspiring work you're doing there. So we have a couple questions for Andre. I'm just going to start with the 2 most pressing questions. I think you did a great explanation around the response of the company and the labor management meetings you have. People were wondering about some of the actions or some of the way that you all as a union got them to respond so positively. I don't know if you could speak to that question, Andre.
Okay, what I will say starting off, because of our relationship with our headquarters out of Washington, D.C. with our packing house director, along with our international president. We were able to start communicating with all the packing processing plants that UFCW represents. And we tried to get ahead of the pandemic once the situation in Sioux Falls happened, where it was just gotten out of control. And everybody that we represented, decided that, hey, we had to have an open forum. We needed to know what was going on. What can you all bring to the table? What can we bring to the table? We're willing to listen, and everybody poured in together to get this to work.
Thank you, Andre. And while we have you, there was one more question for you. What is the maximum amount of days that people over 60 and those with underlying conditions can take off work with pay?
As of right now, everybody over 60 and underlying conditions have been off work since May 4th. So it's almost right now. We reassess it every 2 weeks to see how the pandemic is affecting the state of North Carolina, also how the pandemic is affecting our plants. So every 2 weeks, we reassess it, and if things are at a stagnant or not getting any better, we are continuing to keep these employees out of work.
Thank you, Andre. And then the last question for Andre before maybe we move to some other general questions. There's a lot of questions to you, Andre, so I'm just trying to pick out the best, the top three here. Could you tell us the number of positive cases at Smithfield, and also whether the company is testing workers on site and then reporting the data directly to the union and to the health department or the state, or are they hiding that information like other meatpacking companies?
Okay, I can say this, the company has been very transparent with us on the positive cases. Right now, we're somewhere around 225 out of 4,000 employees, and we do have on-site testing free to all employees. Everything that's coming back, especially if it's positive, is going to the health department with the state of North Carolina. The union get a list of every positive case that's in the plant.
Great, thank you, Andre. The next couple questions are for the whole panel. If anyone would like to answer, please feel free to weigh in on this. The first question is, does anyone know the percentage of meatpacking workers that are unionized? In Georgia, many of these plants are often the main job source in small towns. And a follow-up question to that is, what experiences can you share about successful efforts to bridge the gaps between Black and white and immigrant workers? Would anyone want to answer that question, or two questions?
This is Andre. I cannot speak on the percentage, but what I can say, UFCW represents over 250,000 workers throughout the United States in processing plants.
I would like to speak to that, Dante.
Go for it.
Well, in the pamphlet, we indicate that only 15% or so of the meatpacking workers are unionized. This is difficult because information is difficult to get. But what I want to point out is that the initial unionization of workers in meatpacking was an AFL, craft union of butchers. This was transformed when the packing house workers was formed as part of the CIO organizing in the 1930s. This was the time when the union was radical and progressive. And so you had people like Charlie Hayes, who was elected to Congress. The first trade unionist elected to Congress came out of the meatpacking workers. And Addie Wyatt, a Black woman, was part of the forming of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists and the Coalition of Labor Union Women. But since then, we've not had the same level of militant struggle out of the trade union movement that we hope will develop. If only 15% of the workers are unionized, the question we have to raise is, how can we get the workers in meatpacking to become part of a militant workers movement that can fight on the questions of health and wages and the transformation of their communities? Because we're challenged now. And so I want to speak to all the workers that are listening to this and ask them the question, are you fighting as hard as you can to make life better? That is the question that we face today.
Freddie, did you want to speak to some of that?
I would say what you could do is, what we can do as poultry workers, I think if the unions would promote a little more, like you guys are doing this webinar, if the unions would promote what's going on, because there is history behind the struggles that the before parents had to go through to form the union. There were people who actually died when they were trying to form. So with the generations now, they feel that if they're going to get the same benefits that the union members get, why should they join? And I just feel like if we would get out and we would promote union more, then maybe there will be a start into getting the attentions of the non-union people. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Freddie. Magali?
Yes, well, I would just want to share that for us, for Venceremos, our long-term goal is to adopt the worker-driven social responsibility model that was created in Immokalee, Florida. So our goal is to create a program similarly to the Fair Food program to target the supply chain and having legal market consequences by having this legal binding agreement between Venceremos and the supply chain. So this is another way to organize and to make sure that workers are part of the monitoring of the changes. So I just wanted to bring this up because this is another way that we are going to approach our organizing efforts in the future.
Thank you. This important book was pointed out, Negro and White Unite and Fight, The Social History of Industrial Unionism and Meatpacking from the 1930s to 1960s by Roger Horwitz. I'm reading it now. It's a really excellent history of the United Packing House workers, the origins of the union and the struggles, and up to the impacts with the Reaganism and the attacks on unions. A lot of powerful history within there. One maybe probably last question we have for the panel before we go, and this you can also answer that. The second question we would still like to hear about how you're uniting Black and white and immigrant workers. And I know in Smithfield there's Native workers, and other plants there are Native workers as well. How are we uniting workers to build a struggle against the companies? But it's tied into this question that we have here for all the panelists is, how do you see the labor movement, both the union and the grassroots labor movement, as they say here, connected to the current uprisings for Black Lives Matter? That's for any of our panelists. The labor movement as a whole.
I can share a little bit of that. I think that right now this is a really awakening times, right, where we are facing the crisis of the pandemic that is eventually is going to bring us a food crisis, health crisis, and economic crisis. And with everything that is happening to the Black communities, it's reminded us of the of the amount of work we need to do to fight under this oppression. Right now, we see the police brutality, but everything that we are seeing in the meat packaging is that the most of the workers that work in this industry are brown and Black folks, and everything that we are seeing is really an attack to these communities that are so vulnerable. And so we need to fight together with all against all the oppressions that really mask the racism that we see in all different shapes, in the labor, in police brutality, in education, and it's so ingrained in the white culture. And so this is an opportunity to bring all the people that are suffering towards around racism in all different ways, and to keep going. And so yeah, I think that there is a huge opportunity to bring all this and to bring change that we want to see in the future. If we don't do it right now, I don't think when are we going to be able to do it again.
Thank you so much. Any other responses from the panel on those questions?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment.
Abdul?
One of the interesting points of discussion going on in the country today is around the concept of a general strike. And I think that what we have to see is that the street protests, a continuation of the Saunders electoral activity now moved to the street, is important. But the ultimate significance of the street protest is the extent to which it will unite with the working class. And to the extent that the street protest can link up with the working class, we can then have a real struggle for power. I find it interesting that in the state of Minnesota, we haven't heard any mention of the dominant corporation in the state of Minnesota, 3M, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. We're all talking about the individual policeman. Malcolm X taught us not to deal with the puppet, but to focus on the puppeteer. So I think that this question of the connection between the street protests and the workers' movement is the critical question that we face today. Because when the workers rise up and become the political force, we can then change society. And so the street protests are a step in the right direction. But we have to encourage the young people in the street to fan out, go door to door, go workplace to workplace. And that's why we're building the Southern Workers Assembly as a social justice effort, not only at the workplace, but in all other aspects of society.
Thank you, Abdul. That's critical for our work, to mention those connections. How we bring the power of the movement into our workplace and impact the economy, or in all these important social justice issues. Does any other panelists want to speak to these questions? We do have a couple workers, some folks from Valley Proteins in Fayetteville, North Carolina, some workers from Revlon that manufactures lipstick in Oxford, North Carolina, that have reached out to us and are really eager to say a few words. Unfortunately, because of technology limitations, it's only the panelists that's allowed to speak. So we send you solidarity, and we look forward to connecting with you on your organizing efforts and in future webinars, hopefully. But we were really glad that you were able to join us.
Can I say something?
Yeah, Freddie.
I can agree with the two panelists, what they've said, and to do an add on. I agree. If we take the protest from the street and take it into the job force, we can do this, but all of us need to continue to fight and push forth for justice, because it is a struggle. And until we as Black and whites realize that in these workforce, you have to stick together. All the time in companies, when you look at it, they can do nothing without the employees. The employees are the ones who make sure that these orders get out. The employees are the ones that make sure that these companies continue to stay in business. So without the employees, we can do nothing. But you have so many employees who are just afraid of their job. And like I say, my mom was unionized, so I grew up under union. So you have to stand firm and you have to stand strong. And like I say, we have the power. And with all this epidemic that's going on, the COVID, the police brutality, now is the time that we need to really, really focus on everything. And I think that if we continue to keep it hot like it is, there will be a change. I just really believe that it will.
So I want to thank everyone for all of those really good questions and really insightful answers. We have a couple of few things to clear up before we finish up here tonight. One is 53 of the participants said that they wanted to receive a copy of the pamphlet. If you, which is great. We'd love to get this out to as many workplaces as possible. So if you want to send your contact information to info@southernworker.org, and you know where we should mail it, we'll be able to get that out to people. The other thing is we raised, during this webinar, we raised over $1,800, which is incredible. If anybody still wants to make a donation, please feel free to go over to the GoFundMe page. Oh, and there's even a bit.ly, which is even better than the other way we were doing it. But it's in the chat. You can click on it in the chat if you want to go over and make a donation. We have some additional upcoming webinars that we want to invite people to participate in. They're going to be the second Sunday every month at 6 o'clock Eastern time. So Sunday, July 12th, we're going to focus on bus and transit workers. And Sunday, August 9th, we're going to focus on healthcare workers. And then as we develop more, we'll continue to do them on the second Sunday of the month at 6 o'clock Eastern every month that we can. I really want to thank our panel members, Freddy, Evelyn, Magali, Andre. Really, thank you so much for the work you're doing out in the field, but also for sharing that work with us and helping us, identify and figure out ways to win in this struggle. I want to thank Ajamu and Abdul for your really insightful presentations that you made tonight and the informative work that, the information that you were able to get to us, and it's really helpful in, framing our struggle that we have out in the world and out in the workplace. And I really also want to thank Susan and Patty from the Tilde Language Justice Cooperative. I know that a lot of us talk fast, myself included, and we appreciate the hard work that you did tonight to bring this information to the entire group. And so with that, we'll say good night, and thank you for joining us, and we will see you all in another month.